Okay, I'm ready when you are. What am I? Okay, Psalm 139. Psalm 139. This is one of my favorite psalms, if not the favorite psalm. At one time I had it memorized, but that was many years ago, but I still quote a lot of it. But J. Sidlow Baxter, he was an Englishman, said, here is a poem, the literary excellence of which is only equaled by the majesty and sublimity of its spiritual message. Far from being a mere string of loosely collected verses, it is a methodically constructed composition. So this is one of the height of David's poetry. And then G. Campbell Morgan says, the conception of intimate personal relationship between God and man is perhaps more remarkably and forcefully dealt with in this psalm than any other in the whole collection. So he thinks of this as one of the great psalms about the relationship between God and man. And then Warren Wiersbe says, in other words, theology. Now, theology is a big word meaning study of God. And so your theology or your right knowledge of God is essential to a fulfilled life in this world. David contemplated God and wrote for us a psalm whose message can only encourage us to be in a right relationship with him. And so, again, how big is your God? Who is he? How intimate is your God? What does he know about you? And what do you know about him? And so we see in Psalm 139, we'll begin reading. He says, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my down sitting and my uprising. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there's not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame is not hidden from you, when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed. And in your book there all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men, for they speak against you wickedly. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? And do not I loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with a perfect hatred. I count them mine enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the paths everlasting. So what a beautiful passage. And as I've said many times, that one passage where I was in just a real quandary as far as not knowing what to do next. I was staying in a temporary residence for a while in the summer between classes and college. Didn't really have a way. Didn't really have a home to go home to. Didn't really have a future to look forward to. Not really sure what I was going to do. Really felt. You ever felt totally alone? You know, I was working at an old textile manufacturing plant and just really was down. And I was reading this passage, and of course, I was about ready to go to bed, and I was saying, what use? You know, what use is it to really even try to follow the Lord? It seems like every time I try to follow the Lord, or when I'm trying to follow the Lord the last several years, just one thing after another after another. The Lord was putting me, at the time I didn't know it, but He's putting me through a kind of a school of hard knocks just to toughen me up. I didn't realize that those experiences really were what has gotten me through the ministry later on. But at the time, I thought that, oh my God, you know, is this real? You know, is God really real in my life? And then that verse just jumped at me. When I awake, thou art still with me. I was memorized the King James. But oh Lord, when I awake, I was about ready to go to bed. Hey, but when I wake up, you're still going to be there. And it was one of those times where you just felt like the Lord was speaking to you. Hey, I haven't given up on you. You're going through some trouble, and I seem to be far off, but just keep on, and you'll see. And I did. I kept on, and I saw what God was wanting to do in my life. And of course, the more you look back on your life, the more that you can see that Jesus led me all the way. We sing that song, but you don't see it at the time, especially when you're just starting out. Just when you feel like your life is now starting to take several forks in the road, and you're not sure what the way the Lord wants us to go. But this passage now, this psalm, what a great psalm about, I call it the three big O's: omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence. Now, what does omni mean? Omni means all. So we're talking about God's omniscience, omniscience, or God's all-knowing. And then, of course, omnipresent is the idea of He's everywhere, and He's everywhere at once. Now, there's a big difference between omnipresence, which God is everywhere. Thou art there. We see it even in this psalm. And ubiquitous. Now, that's a big word. I like that word. I think I've told you about it before. But back in the 70s, I was watching Howard Cosell. Remember Dandy Don Meredith and Howard Cosell on Monday Night Football? And Howard Cosell, he gained fame by his working and announcing some of the things of Muhammad Ali. But he was also a Monday Night Football announcer, one of the first ones. And he was he had a legal background. And Dandy Don Meredith was an ex-quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, but he was just an old Texan. And Howard Cosell would use big words. That linebacker was ubiquitous. He's all over the field. And Dandy Don was, come on, Howard. You know, and every time he'd use a big word, come on, Howard. I still remember that. He'd use all these big words. Somebody wrote in and asked Howard Cosell when he was going to retire. And he said, when I get enough money. And the next week, several people sent him $1. So it's one of those cute things. But so it's interesting how you pick up words and you remember them because of something like that had happened. But here we see that in verses 1 through 6, you see God's omniscience. Notice he said, He knows me better than I know myself. Oh Lord, you have searched me. You've researched me. You know everything about me. You have known me. You know my heart. And that's the idea there is, you know my every intention. You know me better than myself. Sometimes I don't even know my own intentions. And there again in Hebrews 4:12, the Word of God, which is God's revelation, so it's God Himself, is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of the soul and spirit, the joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. You ever been in a situation where you don't even know really what to think? Well, God already knows, and He knows what you're thinking. He knew the path and the pattern that got you into that frame of mind, and He knows how to get you out of that frame of mind. I've got a great big God, don't I? Now, when my wife talks to me, she says, all I want to do is you listen. You don't have to fix anything. Well, I listen, but I don't understand that beautiful mind of hers all the time. But God does. So I'll have to say, sweetheart, let me know. But but there again, and nobody knows you like the Lord. Nobody knows you like Jesus. And so when we go to Him, we could rest assured that He already knows everything that we're talking to Him about, and yet He still invites us to talk it out to Him. And from what they tell us in counseling and in psychology, some of the best things you can do is just listen to the person who is in a quandary and let them unravel it. And a lot of times they can put it back together on their own. Well, God He says He is our wonderful counselor, doesn't He? So many times, and of course the Holy Spirit working in our hearts. And He invites us to come before the throne of grace to obtain grace to help in the time of need. And so one of the greatest counselor, or the greatest counselor in our whole lives, is God, the Holy Spirit, as He works in our lives, and of course, as the three work together in our lives, and reveals Himself through His Word. And like I said, the great counsel that He gave me that lonely night when I was just in a quandary, when I awake, Thou art still with me. And I just went to sleep and slept like a baby. And the Lord gave me that peace like a river that attendeth my way type of feeling. And so we see that He knows me better than I know myself. So I can rest assured that God can take care of me. And so He knows my heart. But He knows my thought. Notice He tells me, He says, but you know my down sitting and my uprising, or my rising up. So you know when I sit down, when I rise up, you understand my thoughts even when I am spacey, when my thoughts are far off, when I'm daydreaming, or when I'm out and somebody says, earth the preacher, God understands. He knows everything I'm thinking, even when what you thinking? All of a sudden you wake up, I don't remember. It's one of those things. But God remembers everything about us. God made our minds. That's phenomenal to me. That think about it. He's my creator, but He created my mind. Now it's one thing to say He created my hand because I can see it, but and we think about evolution and all that. Well, how does a mind evolve? They talk about a single cell. Okay, that's physical. But how did the mind come along? Know thyself, the philosophers say. I can't know myself. I'm desperately wicked. In my whole heart, the Bible says, who can know it? But my God does. So we see that He knows my downsitting and my uprising. He understands my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. So when I wake up, when I go to bed, you're acquainted with everything that happened today. So even before I come to you, the throne of grace, and ask forgiveness, you already know what I've done. But what does He tell me to do? That counseling again, get it out. I already know. A good lawyer already knows the answer before he asks the question. Well, the Lord, when we come before Him, He already knows what you've done before you confess it. And so we see that He knows my every action. And notice in verse 4, He says, for there's not a word in my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it all together. So He knows everything. He knows my heart. He knows my thoughts. He knows my actions. He knows my words. And the Lord tells us, Paul tells us, that God will judge our what? Every word. That's interesting. And He knows everything. He even knows the words that I don't speak. When I bite my tongue, He knows why I bit it. I mean, and then of course the idea, he says, you have the verse 5 now, I think it says, in the King James it says, he compassed me about. But that word is like hedged. I mean, God has established my parameters. And there's nothing that can get through that parameter. Nothing in that there again, he is the one who allows the influences to come into my life. He is the one that the decisions I make, he knows exactly everything about what I am doing and why I'm doing it. And many times I don't even know why I made that decision other than a hunch or something, but that hunch is based on a fact that was thrown in my mind. There again, just the decision. I saw something the other day, and they were saying, he was holding up a pencil, but this is a pen. And it was an industrialist, and he said, you look at this pen. He started talking about the wood and how that it had to be grown. Then you had to have someone cut it. And he just went on down. And then you had to have the paint and all the different things. The graphite that went in it. You talk about the mines that are out in wherever, Africa or Asia, wherever they are, had to be brought together, formed. Then the little metal thing around it. Then you're getting into steelworks and all the. So he said there's over 1,000 people that had to influence this little pencil that I had. Well, think about that's the supply chain. Think about all the things that had to go right for you to be here tonight. Think about all the things that could have gone wrong. Car problems, health problems, theft. Somebody shoot at you. Think of all the different things, how that God has hedged you about. There's nothing that God doesn't know ahead of time. And so, I talking to one of my sons, and he was just telling me some of the decisions he's making, and all of a sudden I started thinking, I know why he's thinking that way, because I know who influenced him in that area. He's not even thinking about it. He's just thinking of some of the conclusions he's coming to, but I know some of the people that talk to him. Now that's me. Just imagine what God knows about him. And so God knows every little thing that's going on in your life, and he knows the influences, and he has brought those influences into your life. And so all of us are here by God's design and by his love. Now, over that word, the idea of he hedged us about, it's kind of like he's sifting. He's letting certain things through, and other things he's holding out. And that's where, over in Luke chapter 22, when the Lord is talking to Peter in verses 31 and 32, he said, Peter, Satan is wanting to sift you like flour, but I'm praying for you. So Satan can't do any more than I will allow him to do. Remember Job? And so, yes, there's all kinds of forces out there, but you don't even know some of the ones I'm holding back. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. But God already knows out there what we can handle before he even does it. So we have an omniscient God, don't we? I mean, a God that knows every little molecule of our body and every thought in our little heads. I mean, just amazing. I mean, I've got a great, big, wonderful God. Because after he knows all the things in my mind, and I've done this before, and okay, how many of we think in pictures? How many people want to have the pictures they've thought of in the last 24 hours projected up on our jumbotron? Nobody. Why? Because our hearts are desperately wicked. And so again, but God does, and he still loves me. That's amazing. And so that whole idea, well, my good's going to outweigh my bad, so I can get to heaven. No, I don't even know how bad I am. But my God does, and he still loves me. And so we see his omniscience. Then we see his omnipresence. And this is the idea here, not that David is trying to escape, but he's just thinking, where can I go? Notice he says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? There again, the omnipresence of God. He's everywhere. He says, if I ascend into heaven, you're there. Now, We can think about, okay, spiritual or the heaven where God is, or we could think of the heavens. But if I went to the moon, is God there? If man goes to Mars, is God there? Can a man that gets to Mars and gets stranded, can he pray to the same God I'm praying to here? And so again, I mean, there's nothing that God cannot do. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. Now, that's the opposite idea, not hell as far as, the word hell is more of a Hades, the afterlife, the something that's happened down, it's the word that most times is used is Sheol, where David says, even when he was going to die in Psalm 16, he says, "Thou wilt not leave my soul in Sheol." You know, the afterlife. You know, one day the Redeemer is going to come get me. We know he did that at the cross, and we see that he led captivity captive. So, but here we see that even if I descend to the lowest parts of human existence, and by the way, and I heard somebody, and I was reading this past week studying, I've always said that, one of the bad things about hell, as we know it, as far as the lake of fire, is that God's not going to be there. I think it's too big of a, God is everywhere. But the grace of God won't be there. And the common graces that he gives us the capacity to love won't be there because God is love. And so, God's got to know what's going on in hell. And that's going to be a sad situation because he's cut off communication between those who are there and himself. And there's a great gulf fixed, as we see in Luke chapter 16. Okay, now he says, then he gets into the directions. So we see the height and the depth, the depth of both of the wisdom and knowledge of God and his ways past finding out, as Paul says. But he says, if I take the wings of the morning, that is high poetry, isn't it? That's what Baxter and others were talking about, his lofty poetry and word selection. If I take the wings of the morning, what does that sound like? What direction do you have to look at to see the wings of the morning? To the east. And what happens when morning gilds the sky? And you think about those rays of light and so forth as it comes over. And of course, that's picturesque beauty. But then if I dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, now the one sea that David saw, and it was endless as far as he was concerned, was what? The Mediterranean Sea. So that was to the west. So if I take the wings of the morning or dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there, he says, your hand will lead me. So there again, that idea of the presence of God in his hand, and your right hand, that strength, you will hold me. Security. So where are you? Sometimes we feel, it's nice to be in church and so forth. But sometimes we are so alienated, and we are with people that we're working with, or we're working with relatives that don't know the Lord, and we feel so alienated. And we feel like we're out in the middle of the sea, or at least out in left field somewhere, and we're lost. We're just not in our element. But even there, your right hand will hold me. Isn't it great we have a God like that? He knows every thought. He knows our every place. He knows our every need. And even there, your right hand will hold me. And he says, if I say, surely the darkness will fall on me. In other words, men love darkness rather than light because their days are evil. Oh, I can cover this up. Nobody will ever see it. He says, the night and the light, he says, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. Now, so here we see that God made light. He doesn't need it. He is light. And so he doesn't need night goggles. God sees everything. If he can see the inner recesses of my physical being. He knows what's going on in my, pancreas? He knows what's going on in my heart. He knows every blood vessel that I have, even though the doctors might be able to see it, not be able to see it. And of course, they weren't able to see it till a couple 100 years ago, or even 100 years ago. But God knows every atom, every molecule of my body. He knows everything about me. And so if he knows that physically, then how can I hide from him? I mean, he's got a direction. What do they call those little tags that they put on the cars or whatever now, and you could find out where your car or bicycle or whatever is? That's dangerous, because a lady was on the internet the other day, and somebody had put one on her car. And that's dangerous. But on your bicycle or whatever else. Well, God doesn't need that, because he's everywhere at once anyway. So nothing can escape him. Poor old Jonah thought he could run from the Lord, didn't he? Was he able to run from the Lord? No, he found himself in darkness. But where did he pray? In the uttermost parts of the sea, down deep in the deep blue sea. And was God there? God was there. And so we see that God is always everywhere at once. And then the one that really is applicable to today is God's omnipotence. And that's in verses 13 through 18. And these verses deal with so many issues that are plaguing us today. But in verse 13, he says, "You have formed me, and you have formed my inward parts." There again, everything about me, my heart, lungs, everything, my hormones, you name it, God has formed it. You have covered me from my mother's womb. So the idea of formed is you've designed me. You've made me exactly the way you want me. And you have covered me. The word there, covered, is you've knit me together. We see that sometimes they've been able to now start pinpointing when the conception and then the cells start multiplying and all that. And but it's it's amazing to scientists even to watch that. And but you see that baby forming. But there's something beyond this. They just can't understand the miracle of life. They'll talk about, how does this happen? And then you got in those little cells, you've already got all the things that are going to make that person into a person, physically. But then you got all the DNA, RNA, and all those things you got all the things that make up the brain, thought structure, all of those first cells. So what does that tell us where life begins? At conception. And so we see that he says he covered me. He knit me together before my mother even knew that I was coming along. And so he says, and I will praise you, for I am fearfully. The word fearfully there is your infinite power. Now, we think of God's infinite power. We think of thunder and lightning and planets and all the big things he made. But God is just as powerful in the small things that he can do and change the course of nature with the small things. And so, I like Psalm or Genesis 1 and 2, where it says, "And the Spirit of the Lord brooded upon the face of the deep." The idea there, he was creating life. And now we know that back when I was in high school, we had phyla and all these different species, phyla. They just built up the chain. They don't use all those terms about anymore because it's just too complicated. They're finding that a dust mite has a parasite living on top of it, and then that parasite has something living on top of it. Just God brooded. And life is just phenomenal. We talk about bacteria. How many billions of bacteria do you have living within you? And some of it you don't want to die. You don't want it to die because it's the living organisms that are helping you to digest food. What's that stuff they put in yogurt. What is it? They'll tell you they have 40 billion. Well, come on.
Yeast, bacteria?
Yeah, is it bacteria? 40 billion some enzymes or whatever that they put in, and all those different things. And they didn't even know what an enzyme was until a couple of generations ago. And God knew all this ahead of time. And just think what he knows about birth that with all the science we have today, we still don't know. And so, first of all, his infinite power, he fearfully made me. I mean, he is a God of great power, both in majesty and scope, as well as in infinite detail. And so, and wonderfully, that means beyond human comprehension. And like I said, true doctors haven't figured it all yet. That's the reason, all out yet. That's the reason they call medicine doctors. They say it's my practice, because they don't have all the answers. And so again, it's beyond human comprehension. Why does this one therapy that I'm giving one person do just the opposite with someone else? How can we be so individually made that God can do that? Why does this person, I can tell them one thing and the light turns on. I could tell another person the same thing and they don't understand. How does that happen? We are not clones. God has made us all individually. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. He says, my frame. Why did the Lord say, which of you by giving thought can add 1 cubit to your stature? Now you might be able to put some lifters in your shoes or whatever. But none of us can, we have to accept who we are by what we are, by how God's made us. And so he planned, he knew exactly how tall I was going to be. He knew the forces in my life where some people have to diet and other people don't. Some people are trying to diet and others are what? Some people are trying to diet and others are dying to try it. And all, some people can eat like a horse and never gain any weight, and other people can look at the horse and gain weight without eating anything. It's just amazing how that God has made each one of us differently. And we are fearfully and wonderfully and individually made. Even with twins. Twins have there's several things that distinguish everybody. Their fingerprints, there are certain things in their eyes, other things that their DNA. There's so many things that distinguish us, because we are not, we are not all alike. That's why government stepping in and controlling people and say we're going to find equal results. Equity is not building people or societies, it's destroying them. Because the whole idea of the biblical concept is that we are endowed with our Creator with certain unalienable rights. The idea God has made us individually, and we individually look for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What make me happy won't make you happy. Now, of course, we have to have a standard, and that standard, as many of the people, including George Washington, said, Washington said, this Constitution is not going to stay together, that's my paraphrase, without the Bible. Because that's the one thing that makes people realize, there's some limits to what we can do. And so the whole idea then that God made us each individually. And so we see I'm skillfully, and then that word, I'm skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, or that word skillful is an interesting word. It means not only did God make my frame, but that he embroidered me. He put all the little doodads. He made me look the way I look. Isn't it interesting? God embroidered you. Now, some of you ladies, all you ladies here, have been embroidered very beautifully, but so I have to be careful. But you understand what? But there again, God knew exactly what he was doing. Oh, I don't like my nose. Well, God made it so you either put powder on it, I don't know, but better be careful. Put a sack over you. No, but no, I better watch out. I'm getting deep, too deep. But, there again, God did all that. And so for me to say, I don't like myself, you're saying you don't like the way God made you. One of the greatest things is to realizing self-acceptance. They talk about all that. Self-worth is that God made you and he made you for a purpose. Well, wait a minute, Pastor. You don't realize my background. I don't even know who my mother and father are. Well, God knew that. You don't realize the situation in which I was born. God does. And he already had you planned before the foundations of the world. Now, sin caused some problems, but he already had you planned to be here. Just think about that. You know, God already has planned for Jericho. And I was listening to someone this past week. What if Rahab, she lied, and she sent him out a different way. She lied about it. And someone would say, is that lie wrong? And the person, God would have worked it out for her to have probably even been blessed better. Those are the hard questions in life. Pastor, how are you? I'm doing fine. I just lied. So what do I do as far as trying to hide feeling bad or good or whatever else? How do we have a surprise birthday party for somebody and try not to lie to them or whatever else? Those are all difficult ethical problems. But yet at the same time, we see that God doesn't have any problem with that. I mean, he has problems with us, but we have problems with knowing exactly what he wants. But there again, we see that my frame was skillfully made and he embroidered it. He gave me my distinctive features. My blueprints were there. Notice in thy book, all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned when as yet were none of them. That was King James, very fancy words. But in your book, you already had me designed in your book in heaven. There's several books in heaven. Remember, the books will be opened? Well, there's a book in heaven with your blueprint in it before you were ever born. That's, again, beyond that. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. That's what David had said earlier, right? I can't understand all that. Well, Pastor, tell me. Well, tell you what, I'll tell you in about 50 years. Okay? Maybe 60 years, because I might live to be 125. But there again, in a few years, I might know a little bit better. But just these things are too big for me. But God already knew, and he had me written. He knew exactly the circumstance, he had me designed before my parents even conceived me. That's hard. That's a difficult one. But then, of course, there again, as we see that great passage that I've already talked about, but in verses 17 and 18, such precious things. Lord, how precious are your thoughts to me? First of all, you gave me the ability to think in the first place. How can I think? The only way I could think is because God gave me the capacity to think. Try to tell me how that was designed or how that it evolved. And then if you could tell how that it evolved with me thinking, tell me how that dog out there can have certain things without having a soul. Tell me about instinct. When did that develop? And what cells separated for that to happen? It had to be created. It had to be out of nothing given. And so we see again, he reveals himself. And so he says, if I should count them, they are more than the sand. All the neurons that are going off in my mind right now. All the different things, I couldn't count them in the first place. And they're more than the sand of the sea. And all the billions and trillions of little nerve ending, whatever it is, brain waves that have to happen for me to even speak to you. Now we can get into, but what about the defects and all that? Well, but that's a whole different story. We don't have time for that tonight. But that is a good story, or a good thing to look at. But then very quickly we see in the last verses, and we see his submission. After thinking about his omniscience, thinking about he's with me all the time, and I start thinking about just that he knows my every molecule. He's designed me. He knows the end from the beginning. He even knows my appointment with death. He knows all that. He knows my destiny. And so notice we see the submission. Okay, what can I do other than, what's the one sane thing that anybody could do? Is bow down but before an omniscient, all-knowing God. And this is what he says. He says, oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men. So, of course, being a king, he's around a lot of corruption. So he didn't want any part of that. He didn't want that kind of conniving that goes on with murderous people. He didn't want to be around blasphemers. He said, for they speak wickedly, and your enemies take your name in vain. Now, we have to be, when people take the Lord's name in vain, does it hurt? I hope it does. I don't want to ever get used to people taking God's name in vain. But then again, he says he won't hold them guiltless who do. So there again, I don't want to be around a bunch of foul-mouthed people all the time. I don't want a lot of it in movies and so forth. So we see that he says, they take your name. Now the word hate here, do not I hate them, O Lord, who hate you. Hate in the Hebrew is a comparative term. It means I love less or I reject this person, but not necessarily because they are less favored than somebody else. This is a better choice, So when he says I hate, it's like the Lord said, Esau or Jacob have I loved, and Esau have I hated. And he says, and he says that in Romans chapter 9, verse 13. Well, he's not saying he hated Esau, but if you notice, Esau rejected God, so God rejected him. And so yes, he had a certain thing, a certain plan for Jacob. But Esau could have been equally blessed, but not have been, in that designation as far as heir to the genealogy of the Lord Jesus Christ. And so we see that that word, I hate them with a perfect hatred, doesn't mean I hate everybody around here. That's not a Christian. Perfect hatred is, Lord, I want to hate the things that you hate in people, but I know that you still love people. So if I got to make a choice between being popular with them and loving you, then I'm going to love you and hate them comparatively. But you've told me to love them. So because you're love. So you can understand what. So I hate them with a perfect hatred. Yes, I'm not going to be around them. I'm not going to partake of their sins. I'm going to, as the writer of Jude says, hating even the garment that has the smell of fire in it, but yet you still have compassion, making a difference. So I hate them with a perfect hatred. So Lord, take the world, but give me Jesus. I'd rather have Jesus than silver and gold and riches untold. And so he says, Lord, I got to live around these turkeys, but I want to hate them with a perfect hatred. I want to hate their sin, but love them like you do. But then that last passage, that total surrender, search me. Now, he already said the Lord has searched me, so this brings it to a full circle. Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Okay, Lord, since I know that, no resistance. Search me. I'm open. And the only thing that's different is you're already doing it anyway. I'm just acknowledging it. So thy will be done in my heart as it is in heaven. So, Lord, I'm going to surrender to your will. And so I'm open to your scrutiny. Search me. Know me. And then, Lord, if you do, and I'm ready to repent of any sin. So he says, try me and know my anxieties, know my worries. You know how that I sometimes have lack of faith and I don't totally trust you. So you know my anxieties, and perfect love casts out fear. And you know I'm not perfect yet. But then he says, and see if there be any wicked way in me. Okay, cleanse me. I stand ready for you to correct me in any area of my life. And then, of course, I'm willing to follow you wherever you go and lead me in the way everlasting. And I know that you're going to lead me in the paths of righteousness because it's for your name's sake, Psalm 23. And it's going to be for everlasting. And so this whole world's not my home. Things are going to get better. But while I'm on this earth, keep leading me, because one day I know, as we've already seen many times, your mercies are going to last forever. Amen. Okay, any questions or comments about what we looked at tonight?